Welcome to Saving America. It's been a fun week. If you like things never knowing where we are or what's going on, it's been a great week. Of course, we had the election last week, and we had our podcast on Wednesday to talk about the election. And then this week, we're going to talk about the recounts. We're going to talk about the rumors that are going on about socialism and socialists taking over. And then we're going to end the podcast with talks about the Georgia Senate runoff that will be happening in January. So David Schein, welcome. And I want to introduce David. We are in Houston. David has a company called Claremont Management Group. He is a consultant for small businesses. He's an author of the book, The Decline of America, 100 Years of Leadership Failures. And he's currently working on the second edition of this, as well as other books. And then David also is associate dean and professor at St. Thomas University. So, David, we say this all the time, but how you have time to do all that you do and have a life is amazing. You are amazing. So let's hear what you have to say today about what's in the news, and it's in the news everywhere, and that's the recount of the votes.
You say A, and that's your final answer?
Well, it's in the news internationally, not just nationally. And I find it a distressing commentary on America that a week later, again, as you mentioned, we delayed last week's Saving America broadcast to Wednesday, hoping we'd have a little clarity. And things are, if anything, worse today than they were on Wednesday of last week. And it is a very troubling time in America. In fact, I've been pondering on this. And, you know, we have been very critical of countries like Venezuela and Russia that have had very strange election outcomes. And, you know, as you know, in Venezuela, supposedly the pro-democracy candidate won the presidential election, you know, two and a half years ago. And the previous president refused to yield and, in fact, has jailed a lot of supporters of the guy who supposedly won. The United States recognized the person who they claim won, the pro-democracy candidate. And sadly, we are beginning to look more and more like Venezuela. And of course, a lot of the principles behind my book, The Decline of America, is the failure of our bureaucratic state. And nothing could be more clearly definitive about the failure of our bureaucratic state than the fact that they can't conduct a damn presidential election without this type of fraud, failed administration issues across the board, from simple delivery of the mail, which we've been doing since Ben Franklin's time. Ben Franklin credited with starting the U.S. Postal Service, to the present. We've been running elections since the time of George Washington, and it is a very distressing situation in America to see how fouled up things are. And so there are people that are pushing Trump to concede. I am certainly not one of them. I do not believe that Trump went from 600,000 votes ahead in Pennsylvania to behind after a big batch of absentee ballots showed up, and when people actively prevented election observers from watching those ballots being counted. Somewhere they had actually put paper on the windows. So not only did they not let people in the room, but they taped paper over the windows so that people could not look in there. Now, if that doesn't spell F-R-A-U-D, I don't know what other spelling there is for the word fraud. And it is a clearly distressing situation. What I found hilarious was commentary by that well-known, well-qualified political commentator, comedian, Whoopi Goldberg, who apparently said either last night or this morning that the people supporting Trump need to suck it up. After all, we did 4 years ago, was her statement. And actually, they didn't. They contested the election. The Clintonites went crazy. They launched the totally bogus Russia investigation. They launched a totally bogus impeachment. And they think that the people supporting Trump should just suck it up. I don't think so. In fact, I think that would be very damaging, because if it happens this time with an activist president like Trump, what will happen in the future if we do not get to the bottom of it? One of my biggest concerns is I would like to see the federal government. I'd like to see this stop being a state issue. I don't think it's a state issue anymore. It's to determine who's going to be the president of the United States, an international figure. And I think the FBI should be in every state where there's a concern, and that there should be extensive investigations. And I want to see arrests. I want to see people. I mean, we've caught people attempting to dump ballots. We've caught people attempting to change ballots. I want these people prosecuted. I want them made an example of, so that we can have integrity again in our election system. And we at present do not have a final election that has integrity. And I think that's a very distressing outcome. The latest information is that there will be challenges to the votes in at least 10 states. That began yesterday. The Republican Party is on a separate fundraising mission, and I think it's going to be very interesting. Donald Trump has certainly not conceded, nor is he legally required to, by the way. And so it's going to be very interesting to see what happens over the next 2 or 3 weeks. And I do think it's going to end up in the federal courts, remembering that the federal courts are pretty heavily Republican dominated. The higher the level you go, the more Republican domination there is. But I think this is more factual than legal. I think, when you go out, supposedly, when you have this avalanche of late and absentee ballots show up, and every single one of them is for Biden, I don't believe that. I don't think any reasonable person of any political persuasion believes that if you found a batch of 100,000 ballots, that every single one of them would be for one candidate. If they are, it's been manufactured somewhere. That's not a representation. Remember that the electoral vote presently stands at over 70 million votes for each Biden and Trump, over 70 million votes each. Clearly, if you were counting 100,000 ballots, it should be pretty close to 50-50. People are saying, oh no, the Democrats really went after mail-in ballots. A lot of elderly people supported Trump, and a lot of elderly people had no intention of going to the polls because of concerns about COVID-19. And I think a lot of them voted absentee. But in any event, so that's what's in the news, and it'll be interesting to see what happens next.
You really can't turn on the news without hearing more stories about what's going on with the election and the results. So from that, we get lots of rumors. So tell us about one of the rumors, that we are going to have a socialism or socialist takeover.
You are the weakest link. Goodbye.
Well, the reason that the far left, which dominates the Republican Party today, supported Biden was not because they see him as somebody in the far left camp, but because they are fomenting a socialist takeover of America. And so the idea was if they got a weak candidate like Joe Biden, that they would be able to ride over him and implement their socialist agenda. And I think actually the exact opposite is more likely to happen. And that's for a couple reasons. First of all, rather incredibly, rather than a blue wave, a number of Republicans were elected to the House of Representatives. Congress actually became more red, didn't change the balance of power, but there are actually more Republicans in Congress today than there were 2 years ago. And so there's what we think is happening is that there are a lot of Americans in the middle of the road who the predominant political attitude in the United States is pro-capitalism, is pro-independence, pro-free speech, and people are not in general in favor of the socialist agenda. So what I've heard is that even within the Democratic Party, that there's a pushback against AOC and her buddies. They call it the squad or the mob or the dummies or whatever they are. And the thing is that I think if they thought, the rumor being that this is, if Biden gets elected, that it's going to be some type of a big socialist sweep, I think that they're going to run into some real issues. The first issue is that with regard to Biden himself, Biden is certainly somebody I have no regard for, but I don't think he's a commie. And I don't think that he personally is going to sign off on a communist agenda, a socialist agenda. And so I think that the people that have supported him because that's their real agenda, I think are in for a surprise, unless he gets ill and Kamala Harris gets to take over, and she would be probably a more willing ear for a more far left agenda. But the rumor that the socialists are coming, I think has been overblown, and in fact I think the results do bear that out.
And I'm not sure where that, I know I heard that too. I've heard a lot of people talk about the socialism and all of that. And a lot of people talking about it, enough that you're like, okay, where does that idea coming from? Are they seeing socialist activity or socialist philosophy? Is that where that's coming from?
Well, I say that it is attributable to the end of the Cold War. Remember that in the United States, that the Cold War was a battle of communism versus capitalism in the United States, and we clearly won that. And we didn't win it, by the way, because we had more guns and armaments. We did, but we won it because socialism doesn't work. Now, it does work on a limited scale in countries that are very homogenous. The North European countries, Denmark, Sweden especially, these countries with relatively small populations, relatively high levels of education, can put in socialist systems because they don't have enough diversity that it causes problems, that the people are relatively closely banded. But the problem is, in a complex, diverse economy like the United States, like Russia, like Canada, like Mexico, like Japan, capitalism is what works. And even in China, the largest population country in the world, although I'm not sure the nose count between China and India, who's winning right now, but one of them's got more people, is that the only reason that China has become an economic juggernaut is because they have dumped the communist system. So you still have the Communist Party clinging by their fingernails to power. But the reality is the country has gone full capitalist, and that's why their economy is booming. So the people that think that socialism is a good idea largely are clueless as to how it's worked. And of course, all we have to do is look in our own area and look at Cuba in shambles, look at Venezuela in shambles, Colombia has turned itself around because it recommitted to A, getting rid of the drugs, and B, having a capitalist economy. And Colombia is booming right now and taking a lot of the glow away from what would have been Venezuela had Venezuela not succumbed to socialism. So anyway, but I think it's an interesting situation out there.
It is very interesting, and I kept hearing on the news all of this about socialism, and I'm like, wow. I mean, okay, so our final segment. Let's talk about the facts. We hear all these rumors, and we hear all the news coming to us from so many directions. So, what are the facts? And we're going to talk about today one of the something that's very important coming up. And that will be the Senate runoff race that's going to take place in Georgia in January. So what are the facts about that?
Just the facts, ma'am.
Okay, we've got a big day coming up. It'll be January 5th, and that will be the runoff election for not one, but two, both of the U.S. Senate seats in Georgia. In each case, we have very strong candidates who got a lot of votes, but the way they were structured, they had to get 50%, and apparently neither race produced a 50% winner. Now, the situation is the Republicans really need both, but they can survive with one of the two. I think if they win, they'll win both, by the way. If the election is fairly conducted, which is a big if in America today, as I said in my first segment. And then number two is the Democrats need both to get control of the Senate. The Republicans need only one to keep control of the Senate. But I do think that they're going to carry both. I'm just making an easy prediction now since Georgia is largely Republican. Both of the candidates got a lot of votes. And what happens in a runoff election is that when you don't have the big ticket, the president is no longer on the ballot, is the turnout in runoff elections tends to be highly motivated, politically active people and all that. It will favor an older geographic, which generally speaking is probably going to favor Trump. The COVID-19 is surging right now, which supposedly hurt Trump. But also we had some very good pharmaceutical news this week. If that turns out to be correct, one is an excellent treatment approved, announced today. Yesterday, a 90% effective vaccine announced. These are huge developments, especially at a time when cases are surging. And so I think that if people view the future positively, that will favor both of these Republican candidates. And again, they are in a strongly Republican state, although somebody wrote somewhere today, I said, they're saying Stacey Abrams, who's an awful candidate, in my opinion, has helped turn Georgia from red to purple. I don't think Georgia's turned purple. I think somebody's been diddling with the election results, and hopefully they're going to get that under control very quickly in a Republican-controlled state. But it is interesting, and I think one of the things that both Republican candidates has promised to do is that good old Chucky Schumer from New York said that we're going to change the world. We're going to change the world. We're going to change America when we get control of the Senate. And I think that is a very scary, and again, ties into my second segment of a very pro-socialist agenda. Now, again, I don't think that they can get that through Joe Biden. But remember that the last time that the Democrats had control of all three houses, we got this nightmare called Obamacare. And of course, the Democrats ran on Obamacare, bringing it back or salvaging it. And I think that was a foolish thing to do because so many Americans cannot afford health insurance, because what Obamacare did is it mandated a Cadillac healthcare plan for all Americans, which means that you and I who are probably not planning to have any more children are paying a lot of extra so that other people can have extra children. And it's like, that doesn't it seem like the health insurance should be tailored to the individual markets and not burdening the entire world with these huge Cadillac healthcare plans, which is what Obamacare did. And we, in a different segment, talked about the failure of Obamacare and the fact that they may not prohibit people getting insurance for pre-existing conditions, but there's no price controls. So without price controls, you don't have coverage for pre-existing conditions because people are being quoted $2,000, $2,500 a month for individual coverage if they are not in a group health plan. And so so anyway, I don't think that we need more of that kind of stuff from all three houses. So also the American people kind of like the stock market kind of likes it also, having a little diversity in the houses because it creates gridlock. And you say, gridlock, that sounds like an awful thing. The problem with gridlock is that it keeps the markets happy because the one thing that the stock market and the related markets don't like is change. They don't like things that, well, they like change if it's predictable. If unemployment goes down, the stock market goes up. That's predictable. But in terms of having wild cards like, gee, we don't know what Congress is going to do next month. What crazy things will they do? Will they jack up taxes and stuff like that? That makes the stock market nervous. So anyway, it's going to be a pretty crazy year right through the rest of it. And, you know, the cliche we've got, it's 2020 all year.
I know. For 2 more months.
Absolutely. And we did want to mention before we go today that I will be returning 1 o'clock on Saturday of the big shopping weekend, Thanksgiving weekend, the Black Friday weekend. And we'll be coming back on Saturday to do a special on small business.
Yes, I want to make sure we talk about that. So if you're interested in getting more information, please put your email address in the comments or just put in there you're interested in more information. David is, as we said earlier, he is his company is Claremont Management Group. He is a small business consultant, a small business support. He does a lot with small business in the city of Houston, and he's also on the board of one of our largest chambers, the Heights Chamber. So what we've asked David to do on November 28th, which is Small Business Saturday, American Express sponsors the entire day. You'll be hearing a lot more from it. David's going to be doing a webinar at 1 o'clock Central Time for small businesses. And we'll give you more details as the month unfolds. Just want to let you know, to mark it on your calendar, 1 p.m., November 28th, and that's 1 p.m. Central Time. So 2 o'clock Eastern, 11 o'clock Pacific. So, and then 12 Mountain. That's all of the time zones in our country. So we look forward to it. Again, if you have any questions, if there's anything specific you want to make sure he covers for small businesses, then you can let us know that in the comments as well. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you, David. Remember to get your copy. Makes a great Christmas gift. Election's over as far as our part of it. So no more reading it to see who to vote for. However, make a great gift for that person on your list that is interested in the state of our country and what's gone on. For a person that's a historian or interested in history would love to read the book. So thank you again, David. This has been a great morning. Lots of great, for us, it's great stuff to talk about anyway. So not exactly the greatest thing to experience, but it is fun to talk about. So thank you for being here and for all your insight into what's going on in our country. And we'll see you back again next Tuesday at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you so much.